Welcome back to another episode of the Mustang Blueprint. I'm Mavi Valentine.
I'm John O'Brien.
And we are here with Trevor Van Keulen. Thank you for coming today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Trevor, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Trevor Van Keulen. I'm Levi's brother. Levi's made an appearance on this podcast a few times, I'm sure. I own a spray foam company in Marshall, Minnesota. Van Keulen Foam, not doing business as because I haven't filed it yet, but I'm getting there. And then I also do HR at Runnings. I'm a human resources manager there. And then from time to time, I come and hang out at SMSU where I graduated with a degree in marketing.
Amazing. So, John, I'll let you start with the question everybody wants to ask, and then we can get more into Trevor's questions, I guess.
So you said you're known as Levi's brother. What is it like being Levi's brother?
So for the majority of my life, Levi's been Trevor's brother. So this is a brand new experience for me. All throughout high school and everything else, that was always the fight at home. It's always Trevor's brother, right? I'm never just Levi, and now he's in college, right? And he's got his own life, and he's doing his own things. And now all of a sudden you're Levi's brother. It's kind of a surreal experience, I'll be honest. But most of the time it's good, right? Yeah.
He must be so happy he made it. Go, Levi. Okay, Trevor, you said you graduated with a marketing degree, but you work at HR. How did that happen?
So that was totally an accident, right? I was not intentionally choosing a career in HR, right? So I was doing a marketing internship while in college, right? And then when I graduated, in order to basically get to the dollar amount that I wanted to be at, coming out of school, my boss at the time said, okay, you need to take on some additional duties in order to meet that comp range, right? So one of the duties that I was given was HR, right? In addition to doing some IT work, right? So I helped, install some printers and phones and stuff around the dealership. And I helped out with the detail department and managing labor and some of those kinds of things. So really it was just in order to get paid what I wanted to get paid, I was forced in a way to take over the HR, right? And it ended up not being so bad, right? I think a lot of people have kind of a poor perception of what HR is, right? Because most people's experience with HR is, here, come down to the principal's office. I have a piece of paper for you to sign because you didn't show up for work, right? You didn't do what you're supposed to, or, somebody's grouchy at you, so they just want to make sure that you know that, right? But they don't see the stuff behind the scenes, right? So they don't necessarily see the hiring piece, for example. It's a lot of work to go out and look for candidates and vet candidates and qualify them, right? Especially if you're looking for positions that aren't necessarily an entry-level position, because whether people want to admit it or not, it does take some skill, for example, to screen an interview, right? Especially when you aren't the expert in the field, right? So you're trying to pick somebody out who is an expert without actually having direct knowledge of what that person is doing, So you can either save the company a lot of money or cost the company a lot of money, just doing small stuff like that. And then you also have compliance stuff like safety and payroll and some of those kinds of things. For example, in the state of Connecticut, if you leave your employment, whether voluntary or not, you have to receive your paycheck within 48 hours, right? It doesn't matter if you're on a semi-monthly pay cycle. It doesn't matter if you're on a biweekly pay cycle. It doesn't matter if payroll is going to run in 3 days from now, so we'll just pay them in 3 days. You have to receive your check within 48 hours, right? So just keeping compliance to some of those kinds of things, you can never necessarily quantify what you're saving the company in terms of lawsuits or lost time when it comes to some of those compliance issues.
That's so interesting. I did not know that was a part of HR. Yeah.
With that, is it just that rule in Connecticut, or is it like that in multiple states?
It's going to be different in every state. Vermont is going to have different rules than Connecticut, than Minnesota, than California, than basically anywhere, right? So in addition to just keeping up on one or two locations, right, you've got to stay current on all those issues.
Did you feel like your expertise in marketing, were you able to carry over some of the things you learned from marketing into HR?
Yeah, I would say the majority. There's a lot more crossover with your degree than you would anticipate, right? Because let's say you're a broadcast major in HR, right? At some point you have to make a training video to get uploaded to your learning management system, right? If little old me with a marketing degree was told to make a safety video, I would have no idea what I was doing, right? You need an expert on that. So there's always a place for everybody, especially when the nice part about marketing, and especially marketing at SMSU, is if you participate in the clubs and you spend time with your professors and everything else, you learn to have a conversation and communicate, right? So some of those communication skills transition to like being on the phone and asking like a manager, okay, did you get your payroll done, right? Or just like reaching out, hey, I heard you had a problem with whatever, can I help you out? And just being confident with that. And then on top of that too, right, like it comes to the recruiting piece. At some point you have to say, okay, maybe we don't have enough candidate flow in this job, right? So you have to pull something out of your marketing toolbox to say, okay, can I run like a Google ad for this thing, right? Can I run a meta ad for this thing? Is a meta ad or a Google ad even going to be effective, right? Is it going to be more cost effective to look for a recruiter, or just like let it attribute on your regular website or something like that? So your skills are always going to transfer, right? And it ended up being a lot more applicable than I would have ever thought it was going to be.
Were there any professors or campus experiences that particularly influenced the career you chose with being HR?
Dr. Taylor, who realistically, he was basically the whole reason that like this podcast exists, right? And so he had a background in HR as well. When he was in the Navy, he was writing policy, and he was doing some of the HR stuff. And when he came out of the Navy, he had done a little bit of human resources stuff. I don't know exactly what he did when he came out of the Navy. It had come up briefly in a conversation recently. And I'll be honest, I was driving, so I wasn't paying super close attention.
That's okay.
But there was some influence there for sure, right? And then just everybody around you who like, especially at SMSU, especially working with the people in SMAC, working with the people in AMA, they're like very ambitious. So then you end up with just that drive to do well. So it's not even necessarily that you select the HR role, right? But it's like, okay, whatever you're doing, somebody else is also doing something cool. So I have to like keep doing this thing so I can like keep up in a way. And that's been good motivation.
I love how you phrase that. Like that explains so much in college. I feel like we are very much so pushed by each other. Because like you said, you see that people are doing cool stuff and you want to do cool stuff too. So you're like, well, I better keep up my game.
Well, it doesn't help when people like Mr. Andrew Miller are like posting on social media all the time, right? So then you can not only are you thinking about what other cool things other people are doing, like you can see it sometimes like, oh man, okay, I got to up my game here.
Yes, but it's a great like inspirational thing to do too. Yeah, I love that. With that, so like, I mean, of course, I know you and Andrew from the time.
Yeah.
And you own your business since even before you graduated. So you were in marketing. Mm-hmm. Then you bought your business. Mm-hmm. And then now you're in HR and still have your business.
Yes.
Like, how did that work? Like, what made you decide buying the business? And, how do you conciliate everything?
So I think starting conceptually, like before you even pick the business, right? I think a lot of it comes down to not solving a new problem. I think a lot of people want to solve like this super new and unique problem. And you can see that in like your intro to business courses when they say design a business and somebody's like, well, I want to have this like super special like football training place that does smoothies on the beach and also we surf and we do these things, right? And not to say that the idea isn't cool and if it worked out, it wouldn't be like an awesome thing. But the issue that you end up running into is, okay, this idea is so unique that you've narrowed yourself to such a small portion of the market that it's never going to be realistic to do, right? So like if you go drive through Sioux Falls or like even if you go drive through Marshall, a good example is like look at people's signage, right? There's always somebody with like a dead light bulb or something. People don't need like this new business. They need somebody who knows how to do the thing that like light bulb people do, right? And that guy's going to make a lot of money because nobody else is doing that thing, right? You change all those dead light bulbs and somebody else tells you about somebody, right? And then all of a sudden you're not just changing light bulbs, you're putting the signs up and then you grow, right? And ultimately it came down to the exact same situation. There's a spray foam machine sitting in a shed somewhere and Dr. Taylor and I after class had mathed it all out on a board, right? I had called the distributor, I had gotten prices on the material, right? I had an estimate of what the cost was, or the cost to the consumer was going to be to install it, right? And I did the math on all the overhead. Okay, what is it going to cost me for labor? What is it going to cost me for my like trailer and equipment and that kind of stuff. And I still have pictures on my phone somewhere of the whiteboard that we had drawn it all up on, right? And then you just see the gap, right? You see, I think what we had come up was like 60% margin or something like that. And that was not realistic, right? Ended up being way less than that, but it was a good start, right? You just math it out on paper. I'm not solving a unique issue. I'm just solving an issue that nobody else is solving right now, right? Somebody else has already figured it out. I just need to pick up this equipment and do it, and it basically all went from there.
When starting this business, did you face like tough challenges when you were trying to start it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think capital was the big one. I didn't have any money in my bank account at all. I'm not always the most responsible spender, right? I like to buy cameras and I like to buy, like name brand sweatshirts and stuff, right? So coming up with both the capital for the equipment and for the first, my first set of material to install the insulation, I think that was the most difficult part. Because it costs tens and tens of thousands of dollars to even get like one load, right, of material to spray. So like scraping it all together and then making ends meet in order to get all the material sprayed and get some money in the bank account before my money actually ran out. That was a big thing. Because I was also on the radio as well. I had started radio ads and it ended up being a pretty big timer because it's about the program I was running is about $1,000 a month to run those ads, right? And you look and you say, okay, I can run these ads for about 3 months until I'm broke, right? After I buy the equipment and I buy the material and everything else. So it was just like getting out there, getting your name out there, talking to people, convincing them that, even though like I'm brand new, I don't know what I'm doing, I'll do a good job for you, right? And then just getting the flow money started.
That's a very impressive because like you had all that in your mind while you were a student, trying to graduate, do everything with that. What would you tell students that are thinking or starting their business right now as someone that have overcome those challenges?
Go watch somebody else run a business. I think a lot of people want to avoid the whole work for the man thing. I want to run a business because I want to be independent, right? But if you want to run a business, you also need employees who work for the man, right? So at some point you need to understand how that works. And a lot of it is just like finding somebody who's willing to take you on for basically it's like an apprenticeship and entrepreneurship in a way. You're watching them. And in my case, I was very fortunate. The dealership down the street, they had just been bought in 2019 by a new family. There were young managers in the store, and they were like willing to take me on and train me and show me some of this kind of stuff, right? So you just find this opportunity to watch them run their business, and watch them be successful and also watch them make mistakes and just take note, right? These are some of the milestones that I'm gonna have to overcome at some point. Because like you would never think about business insurance, for example, right? You just want to get in there, start your business and make money, right? But then you see somebody else's insurance protect them from like a huge loss or a huge liability, right? And you're like, oh, okay, so maybe I should think about business insurance as I'm starting this up, right? And then you think about overhead and employees. You want to say, okay, I'm going to hire all my friends because I know my friends are going to work hard for me, right? And then you watch somebody else hire all those friends. And not to say that your friends won't work hard, but it's difficult when somebody doesn't. And now you have to fire your friend, right? Watching somebody overcome an issue like that and then, making that decision. It's like, okay, I'm going to keep my business life and my personal life separate so I don't have to ever run into that situation. Just like some of those kinds of things, watching somebody else do it so you know what's successful and what's not. Because otherwise, you're sailing a boat with no direction. You have no idea where you're headed, right? And just being able to watch somebody else do it, that'll be the most valuable thing you can do.
So with your business, like how big are you?
So we're very, very small, right? As far as like employees go. And so we end up doing quite a bit for having only like 2 or 3 people, right? And I think a lot of it is work as lean as possible. We can do realistically with 3 people, you can do about $1 million a year without an issue in revenue, right? And just like taking your business model, breaking it down, making it as lean as you possibly can, understanding that, okay, I don't need a CFO, right? But I do need an accountant, so what are my options without retaining a full-time, like a full-time employee for something like that, right? Or like advertising, for example. I work very closely with Aaron over at the radio station. If I have to run an ad or something like that, I have a degree in marketing, but I'm not an expert in radio. He'll doctor my stuff up and he'll help me out, right? So then now, okay, I don't need a full-time person to manage like that portion of my advertising.
Where do you see yourself with your own business in 5 years?
That is a great question. I am teetering on the edge, right? Like ideally, I would love to work for myself, right? But at the same time, I'm also really enjoying working for Runnings, like being in the position I'm in. Quite honestly, I wouldn't be disappointed being in a very similar place to where I am right now. If I continue to work for Runnings for another 5 years, and manage my business on the side, I'd honestly be happy with that. Because part of it is it's hard to stay social when you're just doing your own, running your own business, right? Because the only people you can interact with are your employees, because you're probably working like 12, 15 hours a day if you're going to be in it, and you're going to be in it all the time, right? So you kind of lose your social life, and the nice part about being able to go to work and you have, a ton of people around you is, you can, because you're not the boss, you can have those friends, you can chat with them, and you can enjoy yourself in some of those conversations a little bit more. And plus it's nice to have the security, but then also have like the extra income on the side, if that makes sense.
It does.
It does.
Yep.
How much would you say that networking is important for, like growing your business as a student? I feel like we hear all the time, like network is your net worth pretty much.
Yeah.
It's very important to have one. And how has that helped you? And what would you tell students? Because I feel like the hardest part is like, oh, I'm going to have to do small talk, or, oh, I'm going to have to talk to people that I don't really know. What would be your advice to students? Everything is
100% network. If it's not 100% networking, it's 99% networking, and then 1% like skills in business, right? Because it doesn't matter if you're the best person in your field. If you're not in front of anybody, nobody knows that, so nobody cares, right? Because they don't know that they're supposed to care. And the nice part about networking is it doesn't necessarily have to convert today. It doesn't necessarily have to convert tomorrow. And it doesn't necessarily have to convert directly, right? So this podcast, for example, I don't have to sit here and turn you into a spray foam customer or make sure you hire me in the future, right? Like, I think a lot of people think that the point of networking is to gain something or have some sort of leverage or perform some sort of transaction in the conversation. Realistically, it's just getting out there and being friendly, right? Because if people think you have an angle, or if people think you're trying to get something, or nothing's ever going to come out of it, because they're going to be like, okay, this guy's just trying to get a job, or this guy's just trying to access because I know somebody else, right? But if you're generally trying to make a connection, and it's not just trying to build an in-person LinkedIn profile, right? Then you develop friends, and friends are gonna do well for you, and help you do well, because you're gonna help them do well in the future, right? So a lot, and it's all gonna come back to that. The reason Andrew and I got the internships we did at the dealership was because we networked, right? We knew people who knew people, and that's what we got in the door. I was playing adult league hockey with one of the owner's kids, right? And they were like, okay, I know you don't like the job that you're in now. Why don't you just come clean cars at the dealership? And then, that transformed into an internship, because, at some point I got bored of cleaning cars, and I asked the question, I was like, hey, can I do some other stuff? Right. And can I just shadow and hang out? Right. So just knowing them and having the opportunity to clean the cars and prove that you can do something well, transformed into that internship. Andrew, he went over there, he just wanted to take pictures, right? He wanted to take pictures because they had this Shelby reproduction on the sales floor there. And so he went in and he's like, I just want to take some photos of your car. Is that okay? Right. He walks in, the sales manager says, yeah, sure. Why not? Absolutely. So he takes photos of the car, posts them online, and he leaves, never thinks anything of it. Right. And then all of a sudden, somebody reaches out, and it's somebody from the dealership. They say, hey, do you want a job photographing our inventory and putting it on our website for us, right? It's like, boom, okay, there you go, right? It was just like walking in there, doing the thing, being friendly, right? And just like, and, taking a chance on yourself, and he had no angle. He just wanted to take a picture of a car and he got an internship, right? That's like it's networking is everything. It's the most important thing you'll ever do.
How much has networking, like, yes, with your business, but like how has it worked with you, like going from job to job?
It has worked extremely well. So ironically enough, and I didn't know this at the time, when I had left Cruise and I'd moved on to Runnings, the person who had become my new boss, his wife was my elementary school librarian, right? And I had no idea. I didn't have a clue.
Small world.
Yeah, and I'd only found this out when he had come in my office, and he's like, my wife asked, how you doing? And I looked at him, I said, why would your wife have any idea who I am, right? Like, I was baffled. I was blown away. I was confused. And he was like, you didn't know my wife was your librarian, right? And that didn't necessarily mean I was going to get the job, right? But it was kind of like an ironic thing. But networking is going to help a lot when you're going from job to job because, for one, references, right? If you call somebody's references, odds are good they've only given you references who are good references, right? I'm not going to walk in, apply for a job and say, okay, here are 10 people that are going to tell you I'm terrible, right? Like, here's my high school bully, here's the guy who hated me because I crashed into his car in the parking lot. And this guy just didn't like me because, he thought my hair looked funny, right? Like, you're never going to give those people as a reference, so what are you going to do? You're going to ask the references if they have any references. Do you know anybody who knows whoever? And they're like, well, I know so-and-so, right? And they'll give you a reference who's not necessarily a direct reference, who may give you a more honest answer, right? And if you do your networking and you know these people and for one, and then two, you do what you say you're going to do, you do an honest, good job, right? And you work hard, and your reputation precedes yourself, then your networking is going to help you a lot in that situation, especially going from job to job.
Now I have to end this. I mean, not to end on a good note because everything has been great, but can you give us, like, students or anyone really who's looking for an internship, a job, or, trying to change careers or switch from an industry to another, you as an HR, what are things that really catch your attention in a positive way when you see candidates either on their resume, LinkedIn pages, or things that they do?
I think the thing that I appreciate the most as an HR manager is a resume that I can read from top to bottom, for one, right? A resume that's difficult to read generally gets read last, right? And I don't necessarily capture all the information because, especially resumes that are like 2 or 3 columns, put your contact information on the top, don't put it on the side, put your skills on the bottom, like, don't put them like off in a corner somewhere, right? So that way when I read, I know this is so-and-so who's from so-and-so, who is proud of this thing, who's worked and worked and worked, education, experience, certification, these skills, right? And especially if you have relevant experience and relevant skills, right? That's going to stand out a lot. The fact that and part of it too is like, just like the convenience of giving it to me in that format, also as a PDF, right? Don't give me a Word document because it takes me, especially when you consider the fact that most people working for most corporations don't have the coolest, fastest computer in the world, right? Like, my laptop is actually 7 years old, right? Like, I got a laptop, and I've been told that I'm on a replacement cycle, right? But like, my laptop is actually 7 years old. It takes me like 45 seconds to open a Word document. If I have 100 of them to open, I'm going to open all the PDFs first. The other thing that stands out is follow-up, right? I am way more apt to hire you if you're less qualified. If you call and say, hey, I just wanted to confirm that you got my application. I just wanted to make sure that you knew that I wanted to apply to this job and actually want to work for you. That I didn't just apply to this along with 100 other jobs and couldn't care less who calls me back, right? That shows a lot of initiative. The fact that you said, hey, I want you to know that I applied, right? Not just that I applied. I want you to know that I applied and I want this job, right? Because 100% of the time, you're going to see better results from somebody who wants a job than somebody who's qualified for the job, right? You know, if you want the job and you want to learn, you're ready to learn. Okay, I won't say 100% of the time, because it does help if you have the skills to do the job that you want, right? Like I won't hire a CFO that has worked for 2 days at Subway, right? But it helps a lot if you can prove that you want it, right? You can show that you're engaged, that you're like willing to learn and you want to work for the place that you're applying to.
What are some like no-nos that you have seen on resumes that you
Oh, yes.
go against?
Okay, check it for spelling a million times. First thing I'm going to see, especially if you feel confident enough to use a semicolon, right? Please make sure you're using correct grammar. Please check your spelling. I have a whole pile of resumes on my desk that are, and I keep them just because like I thought they were funny when I read them, right? Or like, for example, I had a mechanic apply for an assembler position who couldn't spell tie rods, right? I was like, come on, guy, you know, this was your job for how many years, right? You know, you had all the training and everything else. You have the booklet right in front of you that you can literally read it. And you're on the internet, you know, you can look up these words. If there's a little red squiggly line under it, look the word up, right? You know, if it doesn't give you the option, that drives me absolutely crazy. So like red flag, please double check your resume, because a resume that has spelling that's wrong, right? Or grammar that's poor. You know, if my first thought is you didn't care when you put this resume together, right? The other one is don't put your GPA on everything, right? I don't need to know that you got a 3.1 GPA in high school, right? Because you graduated from college, you have multiple, and especially if it's your second or your third job, right? You know, your ability to do the job has nothing to do with your grade point average, right? You know, if it's your first job, or if you're a doctor, right? Then maybe your grade point average is a little more important, because I want you to know where my pancreas is if you're doing surgery, right? But otherwise, like some of those things, you know, don't give me information that's irrelevant. You know, give me the skills, and make sure your resume is like curated for the job as well. You know, and that means cutting some experiences, right? You know, if you're applying for your broadcast major, right? If you are applying for a broadcast job, most of the time, like if you worked at Domino's, they're not going to care if you drove at Domino's. They're going to care that you were on this podcast and that you know how to run the equipment and that you know how to work the cameras and like plug everything in and run the soundboards and like have this conversation, right? You know, put that experience on there. Cut the irrelevant stuff, the stuff that they don't care about, the stuff that doesn't mean anything for the job.
Last piece before we wrap it up, is there like any piece of information that you want to give to people who are certainly going to college here right now? Do you have any parting bits of information to give to people who are going to make these big decisions in the next few years? I
have a few pieces. The first one are professors are your best resources because they have all the experience. They've done it, right? Marsha's a great example, right? She was a real person in the real workforce who had a real job, who did real things, right? And a lot of people want to say, you know, they sit in a classroom, right? They just teach us things out of a book. It's like, no, a lot of these people have real experiences, right? You know, take advantage of that. Dr. Taylor, real experiences, right? He had a real estate business. You know, he made millions of dollars. He lost millions of dollars, right? You know, and he can tell you that, hey, it's a really bad idea to get apartment buildings when you don't know what you're doing, right? But you wouldn't know that if you didn't have that conversation. Marta, right? She had worked for a number of really big firms doing a lot of marketing. Procter & Gamble was one of the ones that she worked for, right? She talks about her like makeup experience and like her beauty product experience and everything else, right? And then working with big retailers like Walmart, you know, if you're going to land yourself in like a purchasing or a wholesale or distributing position, right? You know, the conversation that, you know, it is tough to work with some of these big retailers because they have a lot of leverage, because they buy a lot of products, right? And like they can give you some of those experiences because they were in the roles that you want to find yourself in, right? So like talk to your professors, get to know your professors. It's going to be important someday, you know, and on top of that, maybe you made a friend like when you're at school too. It's like there's a number of professors that I can still call or have a conversation with, you know, even after leaving. Right. Not that it's been very many years, but at the same time, you know, it feels valuable. And then the other thing is like working for free is so important, right? Especially if you're passionate about something. I can't tell you the number of football games that I stood on the sidelines with my big, huge camera taking photos, right? Never got paid for anything, very little recognition for it. But it was something I was passionate about, right? And whether you got the recognition or not, you developed a skill which can be valuable, right? So the nice part is you can have a technical conversation with somebody, let's say who's on a marketing or a media team, about the photos that they're taking or about the video that they're producing, like whether you're making a training video or you're making like an advertisement or something like that, right? So that's a valuable skill. And then on top of that too, my internship, a lot of it, even though I was cleaning cars, a lot of it came from working free. I would ask like, hey, you know, I don't work on Saturdays. Can I just come in on Saturday and shadow the sales desk? I would just stand there, right? I would literally just like, and after a while I parked a stool back there and I would just sit there and watch everybody, you know, listen to the conversations that they're having, right? Watch them interact with customers. You know, what does their body language look like? How are they dressing? How are they talking? What are the side conversations they're having after they're leaving, right? Because a lot of times you only see one half of the conversation, right? If you're the customer walking into, let's say you want to be a salesperson and you're a customer walking into a million businesses, right? You're only ever hearing one half of the conversation. You're hearing the part where they sell you. You're not hearing the part where they go back and say, yeah, just based on the way this guy's talking and acting, I don't really think he's really serious, right? Or, you know, this guy wants this, but I think we can upsell him on this, right? Or this guy has no idea what he's talking about. I think he's somebody who could genuinely use some help. Why don't we get him to a different salesperson, blah, 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 right? Like you don't get to see the other side of that decision-making process. Like sitting there, ask somebody to just watch them work, you know, and stand around for free. And at some point they're going to find a job for you to do because it's going to drive them nuts. You're standing around, right? And then boom, real experience.
I love that. Yeah. So if anyone needs a job, go shadow. Be really annoying and they will find something for you to do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Trevor, for being here and for, you know, sharing your time with us. It was really great. And we'll definitely have to have you here for part 2.
Thank you for listening to the Mustang Blueprint. We'll see you next episode.
We've been doing this for darn near 7 years now.
7 years?
Gotten to, it's gotten to a routine at this point. Yep.
Are you sick of each other yet?
Every day. That's a great question.